Let's go to Erica Stapleton, who's been covering this trial and the other two trials as well. She's been up to Idaho. She's outside the courtroom right now. Erica.
Yeah, Joe, Rachel, as you know, we've been saying all morning, the sentences here, 2 life sentences to run consecutive to each other and consecutive to her life sentences that she already had in Idaho. These did not come as a surprise, and I don't think anything came as a surprise in the courtroom today, because we knew that these cases have impacted so many families, so many of Lori's family members. Of course, she was already convicted in Idaho for killing her children, Tylee and JJ, and for her role in the death of Tammy Daybell, her current husband, Chad Daybell's first wife. And now she has been convicted and sentenced here in Arizona for the death of her former husband, Charles Vallow. She was convicted for conspiring to kill him, and the shooting attempt at Brandon Boudreaux, who is her niece's ex-husband. Brandon ultimately survived the shooting attempt. It was believed his brother, Lori's brother, Alex Cox, was the trigger man in that case. And Brandon survived. He spoke his piece in court today. So did several of his family members. And the judge noted, too, that the ripple effect of these crimes just continues to cascade, honestly. You talk about the court staff who has to endure this. You talk about jurors. Some of the jurors from her former trials, one in Idaho, one for the Charles Vallow conviction, those were jurors who were present today in the courtroom because they're so impacted by this case. What I think was one of the most impactful statements given in court was by Kay Woodcock. She gave her own piece. She's J.J. Vallow's grandmother and Charles Vallow's sister, but she also read a letter that was penned in the voice of J.J. Vallow, who of course died back in 2019. And it was really a moving moment. It was, she tearfully read how his life had been impacted, and essentially that Charles's murder led to J.J.'s murder. So truly some emotional moments from the courtroom today. And of course, we were wondering if Lori Vallow Daybell herself would talk. She did not take any responsibility for any of the convictions that she's received in these cases, and she went down a dark religious rabbit hole that we've seen before. That's the core of the crimes here. Take a listen.
I will show the world great miracles. I will continue to love everyone I come in contact with, and I will turn this battle over to God. If this is God's battle, then the math doesn't matter. 7 lifetimes or the death penalty doesn't matter. God's miracles will abound. When a soldier goes off to war, he is a soldier. When a soldier comes back from war, he is a warrior. And Jesus is in the prisons. He is turning his soldiers into warriors. For the prisoners shall go free. Sometimes victory doesn't look like victory until it's finished. Prisoners who have been told that they will never go free will be free. And I want you to expect miracles, and I want you to watch for them, because you will see. We fear not what man can do, because God's warriors surround us. When the battle is relentless, and this one has been for over 6 years, remember, God is building his army of warriors in the prison system. He is turning Sauls into Pauls. When Jesus is sending his servants into the prisons to prepare his warrior team, we will be there only until this purpose is complete, and then the warriors will walk free. We are redeemed by Jesus Christ, so we are free right now, but his chains will break. Prison walls will fall. The power and majesty of God will be revealed. When Jesus is ready, he will call his warriors from the prisons, and we will walk free, and we will serve him.
Now, as you heard, the disconnect there is obviously very obvious, because Lori Vallow Daybell will never have a free day in her life again. She is going back to Idaho now that she's been sentenced here to finish serving her life sentence in prison there. And I want you guys to imagine just the mood in the courtroom as she is sitting there after listening to multiple people describe the pain and trauma that she had inflicted on their families. And she sat there saying essentially, I did not have the right to present my own case. I wasn't able to do that. I learned a lot about the justice system. You could tell that Judge Boreski was really disgusted by what she was saying. At one point interjected her statement saying, actually, yeah, you can. This is, the judicial system. You are able to present 2 sides to a story. She just wasn't able to do that. And as I said, she represented herself in this case. So in these trials here in Arizona, we saw a lot of Lori time and just her different conduct when the jurors were present versus when she was arguing with the judge. So there was a lot of tension leading up to this moment. And for her to sit there, I think, and say, hey, the justice system is unfair to me, the conditions in the jail are unfair to me, and I would admit if I did wrong if I did it, but I didn't, so I can't do that. And then to kind of go into that religious diatribe, I, can only imagine how disturbing that is for the victims of these cases and the next of kin who were sitting in the courtroom having to listen to her, likely for the very last time, describe her stance in all of this. It's got to be incredibly painful. But as you guys said, as we've been saying all morning, these moments, it matters. It matters to have convictions in Arizona, and it matters to have these sentences handed out today. I know Judge Bresky said, it's more of a gesture, but I think it sends a strong message, especially to Lori Vallow Daybell, that, she's already serving a life sentence in Idaho, and now she has more on her plate. During her statements, too, she said, how many is enough? How many isn't, is that enough? People in the audience were sitting there shaking their heads saying, no, these multiple life sentences are really not enough for all the pain you've inflicted. As I said, emotional moments from the courtroom this morning, and a lot of, frustration, I think, with Vallow Daybell's comments to the judge and to the courtroom. But again, likely the last time we're going to hear from her in this capacity.
Rex Connor, he said that JJ's dad, Todd, gave what he called the best sermon he had ever heard. I know you've gotten to know a lot of these family members in terms of, their messaging over the last few years. Anything you remember from that particular statement?
Well, I'll say this is the first time I have heard JJ's father speak out. And I want to be clear, this is JJ's biological father who came today. I would say there was more of a showing here than I've seen in other trials past. I would say, sometimes there are limitations to what you can say in a victim impact statement. And it felt like the victims were allowed to say a lot of different things. We heard not only about the impact of Charles Vallow's loss and the shooting attempt at Brandon Boudreaux, but there was a lot of discussion around JJ, around Tylee, and around Tammy Daybell, the crimes that were committed up in Idaho. So it was truly, I'm at a loss for words, honestly, because to see the outpouring of support that this family had, all the loved ones, people who cared for these children, and to see how their demise came about when there were people who would be willing to take these children in. And, it's just so unnecessary. And, I mentioned that JJ's biological father spoke. Charles Vallow was, in essence, his adopted father. And Kay Woodcock, again, Charles' sister, JJ Vallow's biological grandmother, she indicated today that this was 13 years to the day that the adoption papers were signed and JJ went into the care of Lori and her then husband, Charles. And Kay turned around and looked at Lori. It was such a striking moment in the courtroom and yelled, "I trusted you." And again, I think that just speaks to the wave of emotions. And it sounds like maybe some of those people I just mentioned are coming out right now. So we're going to let them come outside. This is Brandon Boudreaux and Jerry Vallow. That's Charles Vallow's brother, walking up here. We'll see who else might be joining them, but they're going to be coming up. And it sounds like we'll be hearing from them in just a moment. Let's take a listen.
Got something you want to say?
You go first.
Thank you, I guess. I don't really have a lot to say. I think I shared what I had to say in there. So, but we appreciate all of you guys who've shared our story over the last 6 years. We want everyone to know we're grateful that our justice system worked. So, do you have anything you want to add?